AI is not a new technology. It's existed since 1956.
So it's not new.
It's not new. What has changed is
Today, I'm going to talk to you about an idea called super collaboration.
super collaboration. It sits at that place between the human side and what's going on with AI. Use AI as a type of collaborator, a new type of collaborator, a new type of buddy. Imagine how amazing it would be, say, okay, I'm going to create 10,000 new sales professionals. You couldn't have done that before with a human. The cost would have been prohibitive.
AI will then go and create thousands of different designs. Then the human team then review all these different designs and decide which ones they're going to prototype and test. And the final design could be stronger, more lightweight, more durable, more sustainable, and the kind of thing that a human could have created on their own. Human plus machine creative collaboration, super collaboration.
But in business, creativity synergy, does it work?
I think where we've moved to now, in the same way we think about electricity over 100 years ago, where we got to a point where with electricity, you didn't have to know really how it worked. You could just flip a switch.
James, thank you very much for joining us in this beautiful morning in Ho Chi Minh City.
Well, it's my great pleasure. It's my first time here as well, so I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Like you said, you've been traveling over 25 countries to speak and then share your perspective on innovation and creativity. And you are now focusing on what I found very interesting is super collaboration between human and machine. Tell me more about this.
Yeah, so super collaboration, it sits at that place between the human side and what's going on with AI. Everyone's fascinated with AI. But really what I look at is how we can use AI as a type of collaborator, a new type of collaborator, a new type of buddy, essentially, to work with. And I think that offers the most potential. So rather than see it as something as a competitor to what we're doing, really think about it as a new type of collaborator. And I think that offers more opportunities, more ideas.
It's very interesting because in popular culture, especially in Hollywood movie, we see robots and AI as something that's risky to human species.
Yeah.
What do you think about those popular culture portraying AI and artificial intelligence?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because it is often the Terminator movies, and we think about things like that, for example. And there are lots of dangers with AI, and I don't want to belittle that. There's lots of dangers around cybersecurity, around things like elections, around the financial system. But I think in the whole, I think it's actually going to be, we're going into what I call the new roaring 20s. We're going to go into one of the greatest periods of innovation the world has ever seen.
And it's exciting to live in this time.
It's such an exciting time. And I mean, Vietnam has such a young population. And I think it must be so exciting for them because they're just coming into this world of work just now. And they're natives of this, they're the kind of AI natives.
So super collaboration, how relevant it is to our current world?
I think it's very relevant just now because I think we've moved from a time of people thinking about AI, oh, this is something that's going to be affecting us in the future, to it's affecting companies just now. So I know lots of lawyers, accountants are using AI every day. I know journalists who are using AI every day to help them in researching stories and finding different ways of writing things in different angles. Myself as a keynote speaker, I use AI all the time. Before I came to this event, I used artificial intelligence to analyze the audience that I'm going to be speaking to, so I can understand their psychometrics, how much humor the audience would like, for example. So I think where we've moved to now, in the same way we think about electricity over 100 years ago, where we got to a point where with electricity, you didn't have to know really how it worked. You could just flip a switch. So every business that was a traditional business and suddenly added electricity on them, it was like a brand new thing. So I think anyone that has even a traditional business today, the traditional business plus AI, it's almost like a completely new thing. It's a completely new opportunity, a new space.
Wonderful. So let's talk about the context of the world that we are living now. You mentioned about the trends, the mega trends. You mentioned about 3D and 4C.
Yeah.
Explain to me.
So I think what's so interesting about Vietnam in particular, people ask me all the time, I speak in 25 countries every year, and they say, where do you go where you feel is at the epicenter of what's going on in the world just now, all this transformation that we're seeing? And they usually think I'm going to say Dubai, and I spend a lot of time in Dubai. But I would actually argue it's probably more places like here in Vietnam or even the Philippines, for example, where I think the real seismic things are going on. And I talk about these 3Ds, and they really stand for deglobalization, decarbonization, and digitization. So these are the three big mega trends that are going on in the world just now. So deglobalization, Vietnam's actually benefiting from that, from the China Plus One. Many companies are doing they're de-risking, they're looking at other partners, other countries that they can work with. So Vietnam is actually having a huge growth because so many companies are deciding to have products manufactured here, outsourcing to here as well. So I think deglobalization, as we're seeing it just now, this multipolar world will actually benefit Vietnam. But then we have the decarbonization. And I think for Vietnam, that's both a double-edged sword. Dangerous for this country because 4 of the 5 top long-term risks relate to climate change.
Yes.
So Vietnam is, you have many challenges here around the effects of climate change going on. But at the same time, you have this huge potential in energy, which is when it's not really being fully tapped at the moment. Whether it's offshore or not offshore wave, offshore wind, you have hydro, you have all these different technologies. So I think if Vietnam could sit in this really interesting space where it could also benefit from the decarbonization, the move to greater decarbonization. And the final one is digitization. So digitization, we're seeing it in everything we're doing now. Everything is kind of, we're living in this kind of this world of everything being digitized in that way. And so I think once again that could be good and it could be bad for here. I think some industries, I think about the agricultural industry here, for example, that's going to require them to focus a little bit more on agri-tech and some of those. But also in terms of, we're seeing things going on just now with people doing remote working, where many companies were employing people, let's say in America before. And it used to be they had to have that person's coming into the office every day, but now that person doesn't come into the office every day. So the question is, if I can have a similar skill set of someone in Saigon or Ho Chi Minh City, and I can have someone with the same skill set in San Francisco, who would I employ? One person's going to be different on cost, for example, but it's not just a cost thing. So I think these are what we call the 3Ds. Now, at the same time, the 4 soft skills are going to be most important in this new age that we're going into. We call them the 4 Cs. And it's not just me saying this. It's companies like Cisco, for example, SAP, writers like Yuval Noah Harari talk about these 4 Cs. And they stand for communication skills, collaboration skills, which is being about critical thinking skills, and creativity. These will be the most important skills going forward. So I think Vietnam also has the potential in education system, in company training programs to really put those skills right at the heart of what people are learning and how they're looking to upskill themselves.
So with the rapid pace of AI advancement, how do you see the timeline of human activities, collaboration evolving, particularly in developing nations like Vietnam?
I think everything is going to go a lot faster. I think, AI is not a new technology. It's existed since 1956.
So it's not new.
It's not new. What has changed is data. The power of data now, it feeds, that's its food, is data. So what we're seeing just now is this period of just rapid acceleration in the deployment of AI and lots of different things. Now, I think how it's going to affect Vietnam is it's just every industry, every job title, every role will be changed by AI. And we're seeing these 2 types of people do very, very well just now. And so it doesn't matter if someone's watching this just now and they're in Hanoi, or whether they're in Manila, or whether they're in London. And we call them cyborgs and centaurs. So a cyborg is an individual who is constantly intertwining everything that they do with AI. They're constantly refining its responses. It almost becomes like a guitar player having a guitar. You know, it becomes part of who they are. They don't think of themselves as separate from it.
So integrated.
Very integrated, very close. There's a synergy that you see between the human and machine working together. That's one way. But the other type is what we call centaur. Centaur, half human, half beast. And centaurs, what they tend to do as individuals is they will look at a project or a series of tasks and say, okay, these are the things I'm going to have AI do, and these are the things that me as a human or my human team will do as well. Now, whether you decide to be more of a centaur the way you're working or a cyborg in the way you're working doesn't really matter. It's all about augmentation. But here's what it means. Here's what it really kind of comes down to. We are going to see this huge rise in levels of productivity because of this. It's estimated that by 2035, depending on where you are in the world, you'll see an average of about 25% increase in your productivity. Let me give you an example. The other day, Harvard University gave management consultants at Boston Consulting Group, one of the big consulting groups, access to a generative AI like a ChatGPT. And what they found is that those management consultants who were using these generative AI tools were able to complete tasks 40% faster than their colleagues who were not using these tools. And actually the quality of their work was assessed to be 14% higher than their colleagues who weren't using these tools. So I think it's just, if it's going to affect everything we do. I mean, if you have a law firm, you're using a law firm to review contracts, if they're not using AI to review those, that is risk. That's a risk for you. And so I think it's great. We're going to see massive productivity gains from it.
So you mentioned very interesting word, creativity, synergy.
Yeah.
And you said that people used to think creativity as an art, painting, artist, music, but in business, creativity, synergy, how does it work?
So we have to ask the question, with AI and these technologies doing a lot for us, what does it mean for us? What do we as the humans still have to do? And there is one skill more than any other that we need to focus on, I think, in this new age, and that is creativity. So we should define what we mean by creativity. Creativity is about bringing new ideas to the mind. Innovation is about bringing new ideas to the world. But without creativity, there is no innovation. So creativity is really the engine of innovation, whether that's in designing new products, new programs, new services, doesn't really matter. So when I talk about creativity, I'm really talking about creativity from a business context, how that's used in a business context. Now, one of the challenges we sometimes face is that if I was to speak to people today and ask them to put their hand up, how many of you consider yourself to be creative or creative thinkers? Here in Southeast Asia, it will be probably about 20%.
Not many.
It's not many.
How about in Western world?
In Western world, in America, it's going to be as high as 50%. In Europe, it's like 40%. If you look overall around the world, it's basically only 40% of people consider themselves to be creative or to be creative thinkers. So if we think about that for a moment, that means that majority of people do not consider themselves to have the one skill that's going to be most needed for this new age. And that's a problem. So in recent years, we've been seeing IQ levels around the world increasing. It doesn't matter where you are, IQ levels are increasing, but creativity levels have actually been declining. So Time magazine calls it the creativity crisis. So why is that? Why do so many of us either not consider ourselves to be creative, or if we do consider ourselves to be creative, we're not doing anything to develop these skills? Because I believe that everyone that I speak to, everyone that's here today, everyone that's watching, has unlimited creative potential. It's what we do over the course of our lives that is important. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Some of them are cultural in different places, and some of them are just the media. So what the media tends to talk about, this idea of the lone creative genius, you know, that singer on the stage of his music, or the CEO on the front cover of the business magazine, as if that CEO has created a business. But it's a fiction. It's not true. Because creativity really is collaborative. If you look at any great creative, innovative endeavor, it's really groups of people that are working together to do something. But then there's the cultural side of it. One of the reasons in Asia often people they say that they're creative less than people in the West is, here in Asia, we often think about creativity as the Western concept of something being new. It's just created overnight. But I don't believe that's really what creativity is. I believe creativity is like there's nothing truly new. It's almost like, it's kind of ideas are reincarnated in different forms and different times. So it's really like a remix. So we're remixing. And when you say, actually, creativity is all about remixing things into new ways that haven't been done before, then a lot of people go, actually, I do that. So then when you get them to accept, actually, you're creative, then what we're trying to do is we're trying to move people to becoming what I call big C creative. So small C creative is when you're doing things in your life or your work which is new, novel, and useful. So for example, when you go home tonight and I'll make a dinner, and I may be using a new thing I haven't used before. It's new, novel, and useful, but it's not really game-changing in any way.
It's very routine.
It's very routine in that way. And I love TikTok. And I'm always watching TikTok videos. There's so many great, like, small C creative things. But what we're trying to do is, as humans, we're always trying to push ourselves to doing big C creative work. So that is work which is new, novel, and useful, and changes the field or the domain in which we're working. So, for example, Zaha Hadid, who was the queen of the curve, one of the world's greatest architects. She did work which was new, novel, and useful, and changed the world of architecture. You could argue someone like Elon Musk, just that now. He's doing work which is new, novel, and useful, and changing how we travel, for example. So we as humans, what we're always trying to do is do that big C creative work, that stuff that's new, novel, and useful, and can change our industry or change our domain, or perhaps even change our country.
That's very interesting. But my next question is that I can see many leaders around me say, yes, I need to add more technology into my business. I need to collaborate better with artificial intelligence and stay updated. But how to choose different type of product? Which direction should I go? That could be a big question for them.
Yeah.
What is your perspective?
Different companies will take different forms in how they do this. Some companies, they might have a very strong established products or services or brand, in which case I usually say to them, use more incremental innovation in doing this. Look at every part of your process that goes into making, designing, marketing, distributing your products, and simply ask the question, how can I use artificial intelligence to make that 1% more efficient or effective or profitable this month? And then 1% more better the month after that, and 1% better the month after that. And what you'll see is the use of the aggregation of marginal gains. These small, what sounds like a small 1%, actually aggregates. It's compound. It's basically compounding. It's like that's 370% increase by the end of the year, for example. So that's the way. If you have an established business, if you're maybe going into a new area, or maybe thinking about moving into a new field with the business, then I think you can take more risks on that. And I think maybe you don't have a brand it doesn't have brand risk to try some of these things. And so for those folks, I would just say, just fall in love with your customers' problems. Fall in love with because once you kind of fall in love with that and not the technology, then ideas start to come to you, because you start to think, okay, what would serve them best? And I think the truly great companies, like the Amazons of this world, are customer-centric. So they're always asking the question, what is the number one thing I can do to improve that life or that business of my customer? And what they're really good at doing is they're good at not just improving their lives today, but thinking about in 5 years' time, where are we going to be going? And so things like AI, you can use that for every stage, from product design to things like generative AI, to marketing, to distribution, to sales as well. I'm going to be talking about some things today of companies using AI to improve their sales processes by creating entire sales armies, essentially, of AI. They can have a conversation with you for 40 minutes and you would never know that it's not a human being that you're having a conversation with.
It sounds smarter than human.
Possibly, possibly. But once again, it's not necessarily about replacing the human. It's about just augmenting them. So think about that. Think about all these companies in Vietnam, for example, that want to expand into a new market, maybe in Southeast Asia or another part of the world. Imagine how amazing it would be. Say, okay, I'm going to create 10,000 new sales professionals that are going to focus on selling my product in that new market. You couldn't have done that before with a human. The cost would have been prohibitive. But today we can start to do this with tools like AI.
And it saves a lot of money.
Saves a lot.
Cost less.
Yeah, saves a lot of money, but it does have to have the human. We still need to have the human in the loop in that as well. There's a Lexus, the car company. In Japanese culture, they have this phrase called takumis. So we've all heard the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hour rule, where if you do 10,000 hours in your job, you're considered to be, you really know, an expert. Yeah. But in Japan, they actually believe there's one level beyond this, and they call them takumis. So a takumi is someone that's done 25,000 hours in their chosen profession. So as a journalist, as a speaker, as an executive. And at the Lexus factory in Japan, they have these people called takumis who are at the end of the production line. So most of the cars are being created, there's robots that are building the machines. But they have these people there in white gloves, and they are standing and looking at the machine, looking at the cars as they come off the production line, having their hands just gliding along the car. They can spot things that the AI can't spot because their senses are heightened. They have a different sense. Now, if you think about you and I, the way that often presents itself is if we're working with say a chat GPT or a generative AI, it will do things sometimes and you go, that doesn't sound right. Because we have enough experience in our professions to go, there's something not quite right there. So that's where we have to have that human in the loop.
What are the first steps of transforming the approach to leadership, innovation, and collaboration?
So the first one I would say is culture of an organization. And that's about creating a sense of psychological safety in the organization. And psychological safety is simply the shared belief that you won't be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, concerns, or mistakes. So it's that sense of everyone in the organization, doesn't matter what their job title is, they have that voice to be able to say, that's not quite right, or I think we can do things better.
That's communication.
It's communication, but it's also cultural as well, because I would say some organizations, I work a lot in the Middle East, countries like Saudi Arabia, they have a very strong delineated line of seniority. If you're just coming into the organization, it's a little bit more challenging. So I think in any organization, you kind of do have to build that sense of psychological safety. That means essentially that you're able to find those hidden figures in the organization, those people who sometimes sit quietly at the back, don't say too much, but they maybe have the idea that can transform, or they can spot an opportunity that no one else can spot. So that's one way of doing it, is creating that. But then we can also start to use really AI and tools to be able to help us do that. I have a client, Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, HPE, and they have a great thing. They just invented it called Idea Matchmaker. So Idea Matchmaker is currently being rolled out to 60,000 employees there. Basically what it means is anytime someone in the organization has an idea or a problem they're trying to solve, they can use this app to basically put that forward. It works a little bit like a dating app. I don't know what you have in
Tinder?
Tinder. It's Tinder. It's basically Tinder, but for ideas. And what it means, it's great. So it means that as let's say if you're going into work every day and you're flipping and saying, oh, that's an interesting idea, or that's not such an interesting idea. So you can ask to go on that project, to work with that team. You don't need any manager approval required to do that. But here's what makes it really interesting. There's an AI that sits behind it that recognizes what the perfect combination is of team members in order to make that project a success. So for example, let's say you're in the data team, an organization, and you have an idea for a new product the company could do, but it requires someone with a product management or a finance background. That idea is going to be more likely to be shown to that person with a product background or a finance background as well. And what Hewlett-Packard Enterprise have found is they've suddenly found all these quiet geniuses within the company that they didn't think existed, who kind of had ideas or were able to contribute to projects and make ideas better as well. Now, you only get that way if you have tools to be able to create that sense of psychological safety in an organization. And that's just one example.
That is also we call super collaboration.
It is, yeah.
And I like the idea of safety, psychological safety.
Yeah.
It's very important for the leaders of the organization and companies to provide that kind of safety to the staff, the people around them.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the leadership role in promoting the super collaboration between human and BA. How do you foresee it is going to happen in the future?
I often talk about this. Actually, for leaders, any leader worth their salt will say that they didn't get there on their own. It was collaboration. It's a team effort. When you break down, when I go into work with very innovative organizations, what I generally find is they're just combination of lots and lots of what I call creative pairings. So two different but complementary individuals who want to challenge and improve each other's ideas. So for example, the other day I was doing an event with Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, and was talking about his creative pairing with Steve Jobs. So, Wozniak was the shy engineer working backstage, while Jobs was the master marketer and deal maker. But Apple would have never become Apple if you didn't have these two very different but complementary personalities. So often when I speak to a leader and we talk about this idea of collaboration, the first type of collaboration I say to them, do you have a creative peer? Someone, or usually there's multiple, someone that when you have an idea, you can go to them with that idea. They will stress test the idea. They will ask you difficult questions. They maybe have a very different personality type to you. If you're a very extrovert type of person, they may be more of an introvert. If you're a very data-focused person, maybe they come from more of a storytelling, a narrative background.
And sometimes they make you feel very uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable. And that's the point. And you have to kind of create that and be willing to accept that as well. And some leaders just want people around them that will just yes people and yes men, exactly. But that's not very good. I interviewed the other day a gentleman called David Hannigan, who is the former head of GCHQ, which is one of the British intelligence services, like the kind of James Bond type people. And he said a really interesting stat to me. He said 1 in 4 people that work in the intelligence services in the UK now are neurodivergent.
What does that mean?
Neurodivergent means they have autism, they have dyslexia, they have synesthesia. Basically, they don't think the way that the majority of people think. Now, in some places, some companies, they would look at that, we don't want those people, in our organization. But actually, what the smart organizations do is they think, how can we bring people into the organization that think a little bit differently? And sometimes these people are a pain to work with because they get very, in some forms of autism, they get very focused on things, and it's quite frustrating at times. But there's gems there. And I think for good leaders, what they do is they try to have people around them who are willing to kind of push them. For example, there's a great TV show that I love called Billions on TV at the moment. And it's about this hedge fund manager called Bobby Axelrod. And he has this woman whose name's Wendy Rose, and she's a psychologist, HR professional is what we think of her today. And she's always pushing him, always saying, why are you doing this? What are you not thinking about just now? Are you doing this because it's all about your ego? Is this really the smart thing to do? And so I think leaders, one of the simplest forms of collaboration that they can have is say, do I have these kind of creative pairings around them? And for many of us, often that is our husband or our wife or our boyfriend or our girlfriend. That is that person. They fulfill that role for us. They kind of say, are you really thinking, is this really the best thing to do? That's a good thing to have.
Thank you very much for joining the program. What a pleasure talking to you. And I hope that you have a good time in Vietnam and share your perspective on super collaboration with the audience in Vietnam. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much.